We were worried that there were people who were not able to talk about bad care or good care. And it's not about complaints, because complaints always mean it's at an extreme, but it's often the little things that get people down. So we've launched Dying Well Matters. And I'd like you to remember this. And if you come across good care or bad care at the end of life of anybody, please jot a note. It's Dying Well Matters, and it's based at Velindre, so it's not difficult to remember. If you just write Dying Well Matters, Velindre Hospital, Cardiff, it'll get to us. And we just want to know what went well, what went badly, because from the stories that have come in, we've been able to go into some services and intervene. One example was a psychogeriatric service. Everyone thought the care in there was quite good, but actually we had 2 stories from there and thought, hang on, this doesn't sound right. And we were able to go in there and provide some education and training to staff. And the other thing we've done is we're asking every patient and family what they think of the care they're getting. It's a bit like when you go to the hotel. If you were to stay here, in your room, there'd be a little leaflet asking you to assess the standard of your experience here. You know, was the receptionist polite, etc. Well, we've got some core criteria now, and we are reviewing the care that people get. And so each month, a service gets a printout like this. The first bar nearest me is the scores for across the whole of Wales. The second is for their type of team, whether they're a hospital support team, a community team, a hospice or whatever. And the last column is their individual scores. This was last month for my own team in Velindre, and I'm pleased to say that we did particularly well on 10 out of 10s across the piece, which is nice. But I just put it up because it was our latest score, and I can show you my own team, and it wouldn't be fair to show you other people's teams. But I think you can see the number that are getting 10 out of 10, which are the turquoise bars at the top, is huge. But also, this is the type of report people get. And the questions are, did you trust the people looking after you? Were you treated with respect? Would you recommend the service? Did it meet your needs? Were you listened to? Did it address your fears? Were you dealt with efficiently? Were there delays in the service? And was it clean? So really basic things that apply anywhere. And once it goes to below 7, it goes orange. So that I pulled those 2 out just to give you an example of where a score goes down, it immediately leaps off the page for service to address perhaps why they didn't get 10 out of 10 across the board. And then there's a little free text box, and these are some of the comments that we're getting through. I particularly like this one at the top. This hospital is wonderful. I paid privately for my healthcare for years, and da-da-dum, it's better than private care. Thank goodness, you know. And it's great for the staff because they get positive messages and positive reinforcement. And everyone was very caring. You know, we don't have a caring thermometer, but we all know when there's a good attitude, and we all know when there's a bad attitude. And we get the different returns by different types of service each month. So we know what patients are saying about the services. Now, I am not a fan of the NHS changes in England, but the one good thing that's come out has been the phrase, nothing about me without me. Goodness knows how much Lansley had to pay for that. My guess is several $100,000 for a slogan to some young lot, you know, who were doing lots of PR stuff. But anyway, it is a good phrase, though, because it should be nothing about me without me. And that's how it should be. The National Council for Palliative Care has been doing a lot and is very active across Wales as well to try to drive up standards of care. And it is about choice, but it's realistic choices. There's no point offering somebody something if it's not appropriate for them. But it's about empowering them to feel that they have control. And control is often over the little things, isn't it? It's about what you want to wear, whether you want to go out, whether you want to stay in, and doing things at your pace, not feeling pressurised and hurried. And some areas that I think that we need to address that perhaps aren't being done as well is fears. We're not very good at actually listening to people's fears because it can make us feel a bit uncomfortable. And there are delays in some services, particularly over getting pain relief. But the other delay seems to be over transport. And I think that's something that we really need to address, is not have people sitting around for hours waiting for transport, because that's very undermining too. But overall, the services in this area are getting superb scores. But the group that I'd like in the last couple of minutes just to focus on are children. Because this is age concern. This is what we're talking about. But for many families now who are fragmented, the older person is the main point of stability in young people's lives. There are many young people who can only go and feel comfortable in talking to their grandmother or their great-grandmother about the things that worry them, because the rest of the world is too busy, or there's conflict anyway, and they just don't feel safe. So there's a huge reservoir of security and unconditional love that comes from the group of older people. Just a little anecdote. My 94-year-old uncle was feeling quite depressed a few weeks ago and said, well, I think I'm at the end of my life, my dear, and I really don't think I can go on, and I'm getting tired, and I think I'll die soon. And I said to him, I'm sorry, you just can't die at the moment. And he looked at me, and I said, I'm sorry, we need you too much. And he looked a bit astonished, and I said, look, you're the one that the young girls, niece, daughter, and the others come and talk to about all their emotional crises. I haven't got the emotional energy for it. I'm too busy, but they'll come and talk to you. And he really perked up. And next day, I phoned him and I said, how are you doing? He said, oh, I went down to the supermarket today and I bought myself some fish. Great. He went from sitting in a chair thinking he was completely useless. But actually, he is really good. You know, he sits there, he's got all the time in the world, and they come along and pour out great long heartbreak stories about different relationships. And I just want to say, oh, just, you know, let's cut to the quick. But he'll listen to the whole thing, and he never passes any judgment, so it's marvellous. But that's the situation for a lot of young people. And I think we have to remember that when an older person is dying, it is very often the younger people who are affected. Crews say that they get more calls from children about the death of a grandparent or even great-grandparent than any other, because they're missing terribly their grandmother or grandfather, but actually people aren't giving them room and space to grieve, but they've lost their main security in life. So I just would ask you really, as well as looking after the older people, just think, who's the younger person who actually depends on this older person too? And how do we get that networked? The Ombudsman's reports are really important, and they are lessons learned about aspects of bad care. And unfortunately, nursing homes feature repeatedly in the Ombudsman's reports around Wales. And I do think we have to keep driving at improving the standards available. There are some excellent ones, but there are some which fall below the line. And so the standards we've written from the patient's perspective are for inspection of all healthcare services, but will also cover nursing homes and hospices. And it's about these key headings here, which is about the care that the person receives and what their perspective is, the patient's perspective as a user. And I think there are real challenges as to how we drive up care, particularly when people end up out of hours. They may end up in A&E, they may have had a fall, they've got a fracture, they're lying on a trolley. Of course, A&E is like a casualty clearing station on a battle zone on a Friday night. partly because of the alcohol problem that we've got in society. But there's so much going on. But we do need to drive up care everywhere. And the big one is attitude. And I think the fundamental about attitude is we need to have traffic lights in our head and have the courage when we encounter a bad attitude to say, sorry, red traffic light, this attitude is not good. And if you like, take the hit, because people don't like being hauled up on their attitude. Or if it's borderline, it's the yellow traffic light, it's a warning shot about it. But if we see people with a good attitude, we should also stop and praise them and just thank them for being so good or so considerate. Sometimes you'll see people look after somebody really well. Just a little word to say, thank you so much for being so kind to him or her. That was really lovely. They'll carry that. That'll reinforce good behaviour. But that traffic lights is something we can all hold in our head. But care out of hours, access to care, access to drugs out of hours is a really big issue that we're trying to do something about, getting just-in-case boxes into the community now. And a card for people to know who to contact. Because when they suddenly get frightened, they need to know the number that they can get through to get a voice, not an answer phone, not a press button 1, press button 2, press button 3. They want a person who they can speak to, who will listen and steer them as to where they go. So how do we achieve better care? You're all doing it. This is a fantastic organisation, driving up the quality of life of people in the community, helping people live better for longer everywhere. It's like the dandelion clock. You blow on it and it dissipates. The next one. But what about that old lady? 2 years after she wanted to die, there she was down at Merthyr Mawr. Up and out, living independently, living well, and died 2 years after that photo was taken. And pointed out that there is an unexpected serenity in receiving. That actually when people want to do something and want to come and help, it helps them. And to receive graciously is an art. I always think the Queen Mother was particularly good at that. She would just say, it's marvellous, marvellous. Everything was marvellous. But in fact, it was, and everybody adored her for it. And she just received marvellously. And there is a great serenity in doing that. Because our living affects the next generation, but so does our dying as well. And so it's not to be gloomy about crossing that bridge from life to death at all. It's just about being open and letting people have those difficult conversations when they want to. But thank you, and thank you for asking me to be your patron.